This is the second video on App04, the social networking application, and it's going to look at the possibility of creating a web-only version of this application. Now, to do that, we are going to need to use inheritance and ASP.NET MVC. And I've not used that before, so this is going to be interesting. Okay, so I'm following this tutorial on implementing inheritance in ASP.NET MVC Core, and the principle is what we've just been looking at. So suppose you've got a student and an instructor, both of which would have names and addresses and things like that. They have those in common. So again, you can use inheritance and have a person class with the things they have in common in the person class and the things that are different in the student class. So these are the student properties and these are the instructor properties. And what we're aiming at was, I thought we were going to create a database set of tables like this. Okay, so we need to create the classes first. So if I go to the post class, I've copied it from the web application, so it's now sitting in my web apps project and in my models folder. The PhotoPost, the post and the MessagePost have been moved there, and the only change I've made so far is to update the namespace, so it's now web apps models. That's where they are. But we are going to have to make other changes. The properties are fine, except some of them require annotations. So I put a string length on the username, otherwise there'll be an unlimited size of, the string will be far too big otherwise. So I've limited the length of a username to 20 characters, but it is required, so it can't be left blank. Otherwise the rest are the same, except we can't do this. We're going to have a separate class for comments, because in a database table you can't have a list. You can only do this by linking it to an alternative class. So I'm going to have to take the comments out for the moment and put them back later. The next problem is that we don't need constructors. We don't need a constructor with an author name, for example, because the author name is public and can be easily accessed. So I'm going to take that out. We still need a timestamp, so I'm still going to leave that in the constructor. But we can't initialize comments here, so that's coming out. We can have a like and unlike method, I don't think that's a problem, but we can't add comments. And we don't need to display method either, because that's all going to be done in the HTML view. So that's going to come out. We can leave the format elapse time. We might need that. It's not got anything. I think that's all right. And the get number of posts. Okay, I think otherwise that's now ready. If we look at the message post, again the message itself I've made a multi-line data type. So we can have several lines of text, up to 256. Obviously it could be longer if you want. And again, we don't need to initialize these in the constructor. In fact, the constructor is now empty. so we may as well take it out. And we don't need a display method either, because the view will do that. So that's simplified the post. Same thing with the photo post. Going to take the display method out. And we won't need to initialize all these things because they'll be done in the view. Again, we don't need the constructor then. So they're very much simpler. Okay, I think they're ready now. Now, because these are going to become database tables, we need to think about primary keys. So in the post, we did have a primary key, the post ID. I'm going to make it get and set now, I think, on the safe side, so it can be set by the database. Otherwise, again, I think, sorry, yes, we need to make these settable now. Missed that, didn't I? We need to be able to get, actually the timestamp, we don't. That's always going to be generated automatically, but the others, we do need to be able to set them. And if we look, just check the photo post. We've got get and set, and the message post we've got get but not a set. Okay, so we've got getters and setters on all the important properties now, and no constructor for the message post and the photo post. Okay, so I think we're ready now to move on to the next stage. I've noticed one more other crucial thing we'll need to change. The post ID is going to be a primary key. We can't be creating it ourselves. The database will automatically generate the ID. So I'm going to take out, and we don't need to know how many instances there are because we can look in the database and see that. So the key thing we want to be able to do is to timestamp each post, which is what we're doing. So I'm taking those out, in which case we no longer need a get number of instances. And we don't need the instances count either, because again, we can do that easily in a database table. So I'm going to take instances out. So a little bit more in terms of simplification. So post ID now is going to be the primary key. And it will be auto-generated by the database now. Now the next bit of this tutorial doesn't apply to us because they're carrying on with a database that already existed where they had students and instructors already in the database, and they're adding a general base class called people. We're not doing that. So we will need to add, though, our database sets to the database context. We've already got a database context which has, in my case, students in it. Okay, so I've added the three classes, posts, MessagePost and PhotoPost. Normally you wouldn't mix these things together in the same database, but it doesn't really matter in our case. So we've now modified the database context, and that means we can now have to generate a new database migration. So if I go to the Package Manager console, I'm going to now add a migration, which I'll call Add Posts, and and let's see what it generates. Okay, so we can see it's going to create a new posts table, and that table is going to have all the fields in. I'm surprised at that, but that's what it's done. It's put them all together in one table. Okay. Now, to cope with the fact that some posts don't have photos and some posts don't have messages, a lot of the fields are nullable, which you wouldn't normally do, because having a lot of fields which are empty isn't a good design, database design, so I'm a bit surprised at that. You'll also see we have a new field called Descriminator. That field is going to allow us to tell whether the post is a message post or a photo post. Okay, so now I'm going to try and create the database itself by doing an update database. Oh dear. It's complaining about creating ASP.NET roles again, which is already there, and I don't know why it's trying to create it again. Okay, don't know quite why this is going wrong, but I'm going to delete the database. I'm going to drop the database. So I'm saying yes. I will lose me my student names and marks, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm now going to start again. The migrations are still there. Let me start again. Right. So when you've changed the database, you do need to do a refresh. It has done a refresh. Yes, there, look, there's my DB posts. But I think we'll find our students table is empty, which is one of the things we're trying to avoid, losing data. It doesn't normally happen. Yes, we've lost the data for students, but we do have our posts table there now. And that pretty much is the end of the tutorial, which isn't that helpful. You can see here, Descriminator simply puts the name of the class in there to tell us whether it's an instructor or a student, and there's the null fields. There is one extra additional resource I haven't looked at yet called inheritance here. Yes, so there is some extra information here which I can read. And here it is, there is an alternative way of doing this, which I haven't seen before, sorry. So we could have done a table per class configuration. I'll try to do an alternative version of that. But what I'm going to do now is just try to create a new controller for our posts. So I'm going to add controller, the controller with views using the entity framework. Model class is going to be posts. Oh, because I chose the console app post. Oh, that was annoying. Sorry, there's two posts. The web apps post we want, isn't it? Okay. Right, let's see what we've got then. So we should have some posts views. We have. There's the index view. Let's bring up, let's have a look, see what we can do. Browse with Google Chrome. Can we create a new post? Not very exciting, is it? Right, okay. Well, it's there, but all it does is one field. We're going to have to do the rest ourselves. Okay, I've now gone and added a second controller called MessagePost or MessagePosts, and this is the create. It's slightly better. We've got a message and a username. So I was then looking at the code to see what I can add. So I put the primary key in, post ID, so that'll act as an identifier for the post, like before. That's okay. But I couldn't get the date stamp in the way I wanted it. I wanted to be able to access this format elapsed time, and I found it was private. So I've changed that to public now. So I'm hoping now I can now access the format elapsed time. So if I go back to the index method here, then we can have probably have it. There's the ID, there's the username. Let's have it here. So I want that to be the timestamp now. Yes, there we go. I can now get at the elapsed time now. But I've got a problem with the, oh yes, can't get at methods in using the display for. So we're going to have to do it a simpler way, which is to access the item directly. So it's going to be item dot. Okay. Oh, right, it's, yes, why does that need a parameter? Because essentially we want the elapsed time. It doesn't seem to need that parameter because it creates the current time and then it should have a timestamp. Oh, it needs the time, the current time, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. That's the current time. Okay, I finally decided it doesn't need that parameter because that parameter was the timestamp. So it can do without the parameter because it uses the timestamp to work out the elapsed time in terms of minutes or seconds. But unfortunately we have a second problem. If we look in the database here, you'll see there isn't any timestamp. I'm thinking, well, why not? So I've gone back to the post here, which does have a timestamp, and the other thing that's different between this field and other fields is there's no set method. We didn't need a set method, but I bet if I put a set method there now and build this, it will now need a database migration because it'll now want to include a timestamp as one of the database fields. Let me just try that out. Okay, so I go to the Package Manager console. Let's try adding a migration, which I'll call timestamp. And there we go, we put an add column timestamp. Oh, that is annoying. So I'm going to update the database now. It will mean that the posts that we've got currently in the posts thing, if we look at those, will be without a timestamp. Yep, there's our timestamp. So sort of blank timestamp in for us. So I think what I'll do is, let's just delete these 3 records and try again. Now, sorry, before I do actually, there's one more problem I know about the database, and that is it doesn't have a likes either. The number of likes isn't there. And again, it's a similar thing. If we look at this, this was private. So I've changed it to public. Going to add a get and a set on it. And again, build that, and we'll need another database migration now. Call this one likes. There's another add column. Update the database. And you can see the migrations does work. Once you get it going, it is very easy to maintain and change the database without losing the data. Because if we go back to our, close that down, if we go back to our data here and refresh it, we've now got times that. No, it doesn't. Okay, I'm going to open it again then. Refresh it here. Should have had a likes. So I'm looking at local DB databases. Mine's called ASP.NET Web Apps 2021-2. There's the tables. If I open the posts and look at the columns, yes, there's my likes column now. Okay, so now I'm going to delete those records because they don't have likes in them. Well, likes are set to 0, that doesn't matter, but a timestamp of 0 does matter. So I'm deleting those 3 records. And we'll try it again now. Okay, so I've run the program again. Gone to the index message for MessagePosts, created 2 more messages, and you can see their messages 4 and 5, and the timestamping is now working, and the likes are there, although I can't change the likes, because if I go to my create new, it's only asking for a message and a username and nothing about liking. But you don't really need that when you're creating the message. It's people reading the message who need to be able to click on a button to increase the likes or decrease the likes if they dislike it. But I'm not going to move on to that. Okay, so I've now added a PhotoPosts controller, and I've added a couple of PhotoPosts. And I've got other buttons so I can go to messages and go back to photos. So I can switch between the 2 easily now. And one difference here is because we've had the extra fields, when we add a photo, and you come to this timestamp, you have got a calendar now, so you can just select today's date and it will put in the time as well. But you have to zero the likes, because if you don't zero the likes and try to create, it won't say it's valid because there's no number there. So that's a small glitch there, but there we go, we can create photo posts now. But we now got a serious problem, because we can separately list the photos, we can separately view the messages, but we can't see the two together, and they're in the same table. Yet because we've used inheritance, they are separate classes. How do we get around that? There's a problem. Before we move on, I'd just like to show you how I tidied things up by putting a header in under an H1, changing the title to photos, and adding a second button here, making the A tags buttons using the bootstrap button classes. So a success button is a green button, and that's for the create action to add a new photo, whereas this one is an information button which goes to the MessagePosts index action, and you can then look at the list of messages. Otherwise I've just added, well, in this case I think this was the photos, this is the last one I did, because I'd added this timestamp and the likes to the database table. Automatically you'll get those added to your index table here. And then I've just tidied these buttons up by making them success buttons, info buttons and danger buttons. This is the list of functionality I was expecting for App04, and some of it we've now achieved and some of it is easy to achieve. So having a heading is no problem, that can be on any of the pages. Displaying a menu of choices I haven't done for the 8 different features in the application, but that's similar to the home page, and that obviously would have buttons which would lead to other pages. We've got the inheritance in for the PhotoPost and the MessagePost. We can add a MessagePost, we can add a PhotoPost. We can display a MessagePost and a PhotoPost. What we can't do is display a particular set of posts based on a date range or a particular user, or selecting a particular post based on the ID. We can delete a post though. We can't add comments yet. We can't like and unlike posts. Well, I suppose we can just use edit, so that's achieved in that way. So there's a few things that are going to be tricky to do, more tricky to do in a web page than in the console app. So I'm going to turn my attention first of all to displaying a list of all the posts. So I'm going to use the posts controller to try to get a list of all the posts. Now currently it does this, but unfortunately the code that's been written for us would simply display the user and no more. You wouldn't have the message or the photo, and we've got to change that. So this is what I've done. I've got all the messages using the messages list. I've got all the photos using the photos list. I then created a new list called posts and added the messages to the posts and the photos to the posts, and then passed the posts down to the index view. So here is the posts index view. So it's as it was before. It is an enumerable, a list of posts. Okay, so what I've done is I've expanded this table so that I've got all the fields from both the message post and the photo post. So there's a message for the message post, the photo fields from the photo post, and timestamp and likes. And then going through each of the items in the list, I'm going to work out whether it is a message post or it is a photo post. So I put a message and a photo which start off being null, and then I check which one it is. And then when it comes to display those fields so the message is only in the message post, so if the message is null, there is no message post, so nothing will be displayed there. If it is a photo post, if the photo is not null, then we'll have the file name and the caption. And those are the changes I've made. So when you run that, then I haven't got a link to take me to that yet, so I'm just going to put in posts. Okay, so it's gone and found all the posts, both. So the messages appear first and the photos appear second. So they're not in the right order, but you can see that we can now display all the posts. I'm probably going to display null where there isn't a message or a photo or a caption, but that's easy enough. We can just modify that here, that if it is null, so if the photo is null, then we can display none, probably just using a span tag, and then just display the word null. Okay, and we can do the same in the other cases as well. So here, do the same thing again, and then where's the message? There, if we run that, you can see instead of blanks now we've got null. Okay, but what we need to move on to next is how to reorder these in the list. So they're in time order in one case, or in user order in another case, and that's where we bring in LINQ, Language Integrated Query, which is a C# compilable language which actually works by generating SQL, which is the standard relational database query language. Before I forget, we must take this button off because it's no use to us, and replace it with a button to create a new message post and a button to create a new photo post. These buttons will take you to either the message controller or the photo controller to add a new message post or photo post, but there's no point to add an ordinary post because the ordinary post doesn't have either a message or a photo.